For the better part of the last 2 decades, since the fateful morning of September 11th, 2001, our country's framing of our national security interests have revolved largely around threats posed by terrorist organizations halfway around the world, in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, North Africa. But for those of us with a background in national security, like myself and many others on this panel, we have seen a troubling trend in recent years. Here at home, extremist rhetoric online, rising political tensions, and the proliferation of disinformation have brought us to a boiling point. We've seen flashes of it in the last few years, moments that have given us a window into the threat posed by violent domestic groups. In Charlottesville in 2017, in my own district, Lansing in 2020, and tragically on January 6th in the nation's capital. The attack on the Capitol on the 6th and the warnings we received from law enforcement and intelligence leaders in the months leading up to and weeks since have made clear that while external threats remain, the single greatest threat to our country right now is the threat of domestic terrorism and the tensions and polarization between us. For some people, the division that's rife in our country right now will lead them to climb that ladder of escalation, use violence or the threat of violence for political goals, and become domestic terrorists. Taking on this threat is our top priority. This is why our first hearing as a full committee, less than a month after the attack on January 6th, was focused on domestic terrorism, and why today's hearing, the first subcommittee hearing for the Homeland Security Committee in this Congress, will continue that critical discussion. As a former CIA analyst, I want to take a moment to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of the scope and scale of these threats and the words we use to describe them. First, the threat we face. A week ago today, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Ali Mayorkas, testified in front of our full committee that, quote, domestic violent extremism represents, quote, the greatest threat in the homeland right now. That threat isn't going away. A few weeks ago, FBI Director Wray testified that domestic terrorism investigations have grown from around 1,000 in September to about 2,000 after the attack on the 6th. And Director Wray testified in front of our committee last Congress that we now have more open investigations around domestic extremism than we do of cases of individuals connected to foreign terrorist organizations. And last week, the Director of National Intelligence, in collaboration with Justice and Homeland Security, released an assessment warning that domestic violent extremists pose an elevated risk to the homeland this year. This assessment cautions that extremists will continue to be radicalized and will mobilize around narratives of election fraud, pandemic restrictions, conspiracy theories, and the attack on the 6th. The threat assessment also laid out important terminology that our intelligence and law enforcement officers use to describe these threats, and it's important that we get on the same page. The intelligence community's foremost concern is, quote, racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, RMVEs, as well as, quote, militia violent extremists, MVEs. Our intelligence agencies have assessed that these groups pose, at present, the most lethal domestic threat. Racially motivated extremists are the most likely to conduct mass casualty attacks against civilians, and militias are likely to target law enforcement and government personnel and facilities. The agency's assessments notes that the threat is compounded by tech platforms that make radicalization, recruitment, and mobilization easier. As we sit here today, we are facing a new reality. The post 9/11 era of security, where the threats come from abroad, is over. In the 20 years of the post 9/11 era, they came to an end on January 6th. The new reality is that we have to come to terms with is that it's our extremists here at home seeking to exploit internal divisions that pose the greatest threat. This is why we're focusing on these challenges today in this hearing. The issue is not theoretical for me and others who are on this screen. In my own district last year, federal and state authorities managed to disrupt a plot by at least 14 men to kidnap and kill our governor, Gretchen Whitmer. The group spied on the governor's vacation home, conducted firearms and combat training, and practiced building explosives. They planned to detonate a bomb under a highway bridge to distract local authorities as they kidnapped our governor, to relocate her to Wisconsin for a, quote, trial. These plotters weren't affiliated with Al-Qaeda or ISIS. They didn't hail from war-torn regions halfway around the world. they were Americans. And they were radicalized right here at home. These men were affiliated with a group called the Wolverine Watchmen, a violent extremist group threatening to start a civil war here in the United States. And even just this week, another 22-year-old man from my district who was affiliated with this group was charged with 2 felony counts related to modifying a semi-automatic weapon. This is exactly what the FBI and DHS have been sounding the alarm over. In this moment, groups like this that are the ones that pose the greatest threat to our safety and our way of life. I am very, very grateful for the work of law enforcement at both the state and federal level who disrupted this terrible plot. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, who is here with us today, has led the majority of the charges against these defendants. And she has charged these 8 of the extremists with, quote, providing material support for terrorist acts. And 2 of the 8 were additionally charged by her office with the, quote, threat of terrorism. AG Nessel's work highlights the very reason we have called this hearing. It lays out, today we'll hear about the patchwork of state and local and federal laws that we have to prosecute violent extremists. As many of you know, although domestic terrorism is defined in federal law, there are no specific federal domestic terrorism charges. And while some of these investigations may result in, some investigations do result in serious charges, such as hate crimes and gun charges. And in the case of January 6th, we've had perpetrators charged with conspiracy and sedition. Many of these domestic terrorism related investigations will not progress as terrorism related charges. This is a major reason why we're here today, as I said, to understand the legal authorities we do and do not have to prosecute domestic terrorists, and in particular, to understand whether federal legislation is or is not needed to tackle these threats. In the meantime, states have tried to devise their own systems for countering domestic terrorism and hate-fueled violence, but those approaches differ. And in states like Michigan and Texas, for example, those differences can be significant. So today's hearing will allow us to hear from law enforcement leaders in 3 states about how they're working to combat these threats and the legal tools they have and don't have at their disposal. We will also, in the subcommittee, examine how states coordinate federal government with the federal government to combat the threat and how the federal government can better complement state and local communities' efforts. Our state and local law enforcement, our attorneys general, are on the front lines of this fight, and it's great that we have them here today to speak directly to the public on this. I will just say, so one of the things that I'm personally looking at is some legislation to ensure that DHS has the tools that they need from an intelligence analysis perspective to better understand these threats. One of the things we know is we just don't do a ton of data collection. We just don't understand the magnitude of the threat. And I hope this is an area where myself and the other side of the aisle can work to improve the Department of Homeland Security's capabilities. In addition to our witnesses, I just want to take a brief moment to thank the attorneys general from District of Columbia and Oregon and the National District Attorneys Association for their work on this topic, and note that some statements they have submitted for the record. I'm eager to hear from our witnesses today about where we can improve and where we can, follow through with that guarantee of safety to every American. I know that we want to set a strong tone, a bipartisan tone, and here in this subcommittee. With that, I thank the witnesses for being here, and I recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger, for an opening statement.